He can't be a problem anymore. The inheritance is mine. The icy thought of the millionaire widow, Donna Ilara, cut through the air more sharply than the merciless wind of that night. With calculating cruelty, she abandoned little Leo, just 5 years old, feverish and delirious, at the edge of the dark and treacherous forest. The little boy's hazy eyes barely registered the silhouette of the only family he had left disappearing into the fog, while the biting cold clung to his fragile skin. A sinister howl echoed from the depths of the woods, and he felt death awaited him. But what was truly approaching was something far grander, something that would defy all logic and change his destiny forever. The howl, a premonition of an end, now drew closer, heavy and rhythmic, like the drum of a giant heart in the darkness. Leo, huddled on the damp, icy ground, felt his body tremble, not just from the biting cold, but from a primal fear that the high fever couldn't extinguish. His eyes, almost closed by heavy lids, barely distinguished shapes. An immense, bright form materialized in the creeping fog, an almost ghostly glow. It wasn't the wolf he imagined, but something much larger, more imposing, with deep blue eyes that seemed to see through his childlike soul. The air around the little boy grew tense, charged with a wild and powerful presence. The majestic albino tiger, a creature of whispered legends, stopped a few paces from Leo. Its warm breath, smelling of earth and forest, enveloped the boy. Leo expected the attack, the inevitable end, but what came was a soft, unexpected touch. The animal nudged its snout against his feverish little hand, a gesture that felt more like a protective caress than a threat. Heat emanated from the tiger's massive body, unlike the fever, promising shelter and safety. Slowly, with surprising grace, the tiger lay down, curling around Leo's small body, forming a living barrier against the icy wind and biting cold. The feline's soft, dense fur was an unexpected blanket, and the deep purr emanating from its chest was a strange, yet profoundly comforting sound that lulled the boy into a deep sleep, medicated by exhaustion and fever. While Leo nestled unconsciously in the unexpected warmth of the beast, miles away, Donna Ilara drove her luxury car back to the mansion. A thin, almost imperceptible smile played on her pale lips. "Problem solved," she murmured to herself, her voice as cold as the night. She felt a slight tremor in her hands, but attributed it to tiredness, not guilt. The image of little Leo, so fragile and defenseless, abandoned at the edge of the forest, tried to invade her thoughts, but she pushed it away with the same determination with which she pushed open the doors to her vast fortune. The inheritance now was secure. Her mind was already planning the next steps: lucrative investments, exotic trips. There was no room for remorse in her meticulously calculated life. However, a pang of something she couldn't name, perhaps a distant echo of humanity, made her grip the steering wheel tighter, her knuckles whitening. She found herself justifying her cruel act, repeating that Leo would only be a burden, an unnecessary expense, an impediment to her freedom and ambitious plans. He had no one else, after all. Who would miss him? The forest was vast, and nature mercilessly cruel. It was destiny, she insisted, but deep down, a small voice whispered that there was something terribly wrong with her actions, an abyss that all her wealth could not fill. She ignored that voice, as she always did with any emotion that threatened her icy fortress. The mansion came into view, imposing and solitary, like herself, waiting for her in the darkness. Donna Ilara entered the mansion, the heavy silence swallowing her. The large house seemed even emptier without the presence, however fleeting, of little Leo. She took off her fur coat, hanging it with an automatic gesture. The image of the boy's hazy eyes, full of fever and confusion, insisted on returning like a ghost. She shook her head, irritated. "Nonsense," she grumbled, turning on the living room lights, which illuminated expensive paintings and antique furniture, symbols of her wealth. She sat on the velvet sofa, trying to focus on financial reports. But the words danced on the page, meaningless. What was that unsettling feeling in her chest? It wasn't guilt. She refused to believe. It was just tiredness. The tension of having to deal with such a complicated problem. Leo was an orphan with no one. No one would look for him. No one would know. She repeated these phrases like a mantra, a desperate attempt to silence the voice that whispered about the cruelty of her act. Her fingers drummed on the mahogany coffee table, a restless rhythm that betrayed the calm she tried to project. She drank a glass of water, her throat dry. The night seemed longer and darker, and every creak of the house echoed like a lament. In the forest, dawn began to tinge the sky with pale shades of pink and grey. Leo still slept deeply, nestled against the warm flank of the albino tiger. The fever, though present, seemed to have subsided a little, and the boy's breathing was more regular. The majestic feline remained vigilant, its blue eyes scanning the woods, attentive to any sound. It had driven away a pack of curious coyotes during the night with a low, menacing growl. The warmth of its body was a balm for the little one, a shield against the cold that still hung in the damp air. Leo stirred slightly, a small sigh escaping his lips. The tiger responded with a soft, almost imperceptible purr, a sound that, for Leo, was now synonymous with safety. The animal's white fur, once a threat, was now the softest of blankets, and the smell of the forest, once frightening, was now the scent of protection. Meanwhile, in the nearby small town, Leo's absence began to be noticed. Maria, Donna Ilara's cook at the mansion, a kind-hearted woman with attentive eyes, arrived for her morning shift and found the unusual silence in the kitchen strange. Leo, despite his fragility, was usually the first to greet her, his large, curious eyes asking for a piece of fresh bread. Today, there was no sign of him. She asked the housekeeper, Mrs. Almeida, who seemed strangely evasive. The boy. He went traveling with Donna Ilara, the housekeeper said, averting her gaze and avoiding eye contact. But Maria knew that Donna Ilara never took Leo on her trips. The boy was always left in the care of the staff. A pang of worry tightened Maria's chest, an icy feeling that spread. She knew her employer's coldness, but the idea of Leo alone, or worse, abandoned, chilled her to the bone. She tried to call Donna Ilara, but the millionaire's phone was off, as if she wanted to isolate herself. Maria's unease grew with each passing minute, turning into a dark certainty. Leo was such a sweet and innocent boy, and he didn't deserve to be forgotten or mistreated. With a lump in her throat and a heavy heart, Maria decided she couldn't simply ignore her premonition. She needed to act, if only to calm her own distressed heart and ensure the little one was well. The small community had a strong sense of unity and mutual care, and the absence of a child would not go unnoticed for long. Maria knew that the truth, however painful, needed to come to light. Maria, with a heavy heart, could not ignore Mrs. Almeida's evasiveness. She knew that the housekeeper, though loyal, had a human side. Mrs. Almeida, you know Donna Ilara never takes Leo on her trips. Where is he really? Maria asked, her voice low but firm. The housekeeper hesitated, averting her eyes. It's none of our business, Maria. Donna Ilara is responsible, she murmured without conviction. Maria noticed the crack. He's a sick child. We can't just close our eyes. The cook decided to act. After her shift, Maria went straight to the town's small police station. Sergeant Roberto, a man with a thick mustache and kind eyes, listened attentively to her story. He knew Donna Ilara's cold reputation, but also Maria's kindness. A missing child is serious, Maria, but Donna Ilara is the legal guardian. If she said she took him traveling... The sergeant began, uncomfortable. She lied. Sergeant, I know her. Leo had a high fever last night. Maria insisted, her hands clasped in supplication. The passion in her voice touched the sergeant. He promised to make discreet calls, starting with the nearest hospital. At the mansion, Donna Ilara tried to maintain her routine. She leafed through a jewelry catalogue, but her mind was far away, haunted by thoughts. Every shadow, every sound, seemed like a reminder. The silence of the house, once a balm, was now oppressive. She found herself looking at the small chair where Leo used to sit for breakfast. An emptiness that her possessions couldn't fill began to settle in. She tried to rationalize. He would be better off, free from her influence somewhere. But where? The image of the feverish boy, abandoned, returned with force. She stood up abruptly, knocking over the catalogue. "Nonsense!" she exclaimed, wanting to chase away the thoughts. In the forest, Leo awoke. The fever had subsided, and he felt hungry. His eyes opened, and he saw the soft snout of the albino tiger just inches away. The animal watched him with impressive serenity. Leo, without fear, reached out and touched the dense fur. The feline purred, a deep sound that vibrated in its chest. It was a sound of acceptance, of protection. Leo felt safe, warm. The tiger stood up and, with a gentle nudge of its snout, indicated a puddle of fresh water. Leo drank eagerly. The connection between them, once a survival instinct, was now a bond of trust and affection that defied nature itself. In the late afternoon, Sergeant Roberto called Maria. "There's no record of Leo in any regional hospital, Maria, nor any news of Donna Ilara having traveled," he said, his voice concerned. "That only confirms my suspicions, Sergeant. We need to find him," Maria replied, her voice choked with urgency. The news spread quickly through the small community by word of mouth. Neighbors, who had always seen Leo as a sweet and lonely boy, began to mobilize. The idea of a defenseless child lost or abandoned was a blow to the heart of those simple, supportive people. The support network, woven by bonds of genuine compassion and altruism, began to form, slowly but inexorably, to rescue little Leo and uncover the truth behind his mysterious disappearance. Donna Ilara's fate, on the other hand, began to complicate as the curtain of her coldness tore, revealing the cracks in her cruel plan. The news of Leo's disappearance, initially a whisper, soon turned into a clamor that echoed through the cobblestone streets of the small town. Solidarity, an ever-present seed in that community, sprouted with strength. Maria, her eyes clouded with worry, became the epicenter of this mobilization. She spoke with every neighbor, every shopkeeper, describing the boy, his fragility, the fever that consumed him. Sergeant Roberto, seeing Maria's genuine anguish and the growing popular unrest, could no longer limit himself to discreet phone calls. He organized search teams, volunteers who knew the forest like the back of their hand, equipped with flashlights and a burning desire to find the little one. The forest, once a picturesque backdrop, now became a labyrinth of mysteries and dangers, and with each passing hour, hope mingled with an icy fear. At the mansion, Donna Ilara felt the net closing in. The phone rang incessantly, each call a jab at her armor of coldness. They were curious neighbors, concerned community members, and even Sergeant Roberto, whose voice, once cordial, now carried a tone of veiled authority. She answered some calls with a controlled voice, repeating the lie about the trip, but with each repetition, the lie sounded hollower, more fragile. Her gestures, once precise, became clumsy. She knocked over a teacup, the shattering sound echoing in her mind like her own reputation crumbling. She looked out the window at the darkness of the forest, an image that once brought her satisfaction, now caused her a shiver. Guilt, which she had tried so hard to bury, began to scratch the surface of her soul, a corrosive feeling that all her wealth could not ward off. Meanwhile, in the depths of the forest, Leo and his improbable guardian lived in a bubble of peace. The boy's fever had completely vanished, and he laughed, a crystalline sound that seemed to awaken the very woods. The albino tiger, with its infinite patience, watched Leo play with a dry leaf, rolling it across the ground. The feline, once feared, was now the gentlest of companions. Leo, with his childlike innocence, didn't see a predator, but a giant, warm friend. He approached the tiger, nestling against its soft flank, and the animal responded with a deep purr, a melody of protection. The connection between them deepened with each moment, an invisible yet unbreakable bond, forged amidst abandonment and vulnerability. The search teams drew closer. Sergeant Roberto, leading a group of volunteers, found Leo's handkerchief near a less-used trail, an undeniable sign that the boy had been there. Maria's heart, which accompanied the search, leaped with hope and anguish. "He's here! Sergeant, I know he is!" she exclaimed, pointing to the dense forest. The news spread quickly among the searchers, renewing their vigor and determination. The forest, once silent, now was filled with calls and whispers, the sound of breaking branches and rustling leaves. The network of compassion and altruism tightened, and the truth about little Leo and Donna Ilara's cruel act was about to come to light, revealing that goodness, at times, resides in the most unexpected places. The sounds of the search, once distant and sparse, now became an increasingly close chorus, a symphony of voices and footsteps that broke the sacred stillness of the forest. Leo, who had fallen asleep again, nestled beside the albino tiger, lifted his head. His eyes, once hazy with fever, now shone with childlike curiosity, reflecting the faint light of dawn filtering through the treetops. The tiger, in turn, raised its majestic head, its pointed ears swiveling slightly to catch every sound. Its blue eyes, once serene and protective, now carried a vigilant intensity, a primal instinct that alerted it to the approach of strangers. It didn't move, but its posture became more rigid, a living shield for the little one it protected. Maria, at the head of a small group of volunteers, tripped on an exposed root, but her gaze was fixed ahead, where the vegetation opened into a small clearing. She saw it. First, an unusual white patch in the midst of the dense green of the woods, then the unmistakable shape of a large feline, and, beside it, the small figure of Leo. Her heart leapt, a mix of terror and relief that left her breathless. Sergeant Roberto, right behind, held a flashlight, but the dawn light was already enough to reveal the surreal scene unfolding before them. A sepulchral silence fell upon the searchers. No one dared to breathe. There, in the heart of the forest, was Leo, the missing little boy, sleeping peacefully beside a majestic albino tiger, a legendary and feared creature. Maria let out a muffled sob, bringing her trembling hands to her mouth, her eyes clouded with tears that were a mix of fear and gratitude. Sergeant Roberto, with years of experience in difficult situations, felt a shiver down his spine. It was an image that defied logic, nature, and everything they knew about the wild world. The tiger, sensing the human presence, slowly rose with impressive dignity. It didn't roar, didn't bare its teeth in threat. It merely positioned itself between Leo and the newcomers, a protective barrier, its blue eyes fixed on each of them, conveying a clear message that the boy was under its guardianship. Leo, awakened by the movement and the sudden quietness, opened his eyes, and upon seeing Maria, a pure, tired smile lit up his childlike face. "Maria," he whispered, extending a small hand towards her without any trace of fear of the giant feline beside him. Maria, ignoring the danger and driven by a greater force that came from love and compassion, took a hesitant step forward. "Leo, my love," she called, her voice choked with emotion. The tiger let out a low purr, a sound that seemed more like a cautious warning than an actual threat. Sergeant Roberto, with a cautious gesture, asked the others to step back, knowing that any sudden movement could trigger a tragedy. But the tiger did not attack, it merely observed, allowing Maria to approach slowly. Leo, with the innocence of his 5 years, seemed not to understand the tension in the air. He stood up, staggering, and the tiger gently nudged its snout against the boy's back, as if encouraging him to go. Maria finally reached Leo, hugging him tightly, tears streaming down her face as she felt the warmth of the boy's body, undeniable proof of a miracle. The tiger, after a last and deep look at the boy, turned and, with silent agility, disappeared into the dense forest, leaving behind only the legend and the indelible mark of its unexpected kindness. The news of the encounter spread like wildfire, not only through the small town, but across the entire country. The image of Leo, saved by an albino tiger, graced the newspaper covers and dominated the news, shocking and moving everyone. At the mansion, Donna Ilara watched television, her eyes wide with horror, her body trembling uncontrollably. The lie crumbled before her eyes. The cruel, meticulously orchestrated plan was now exposed in broad daylight for the whole world to see. Her face, once a mask of coldness and calculation, contorted into an expression of panic and despair. The phone rang incessantly, but she didn't answer, unable to face the approaching avalanche. The world seemed to collapse around her, not with the fury of justice, but with the overwhelming weight of the truth she had tried to bury. The community, once merely concerned, was now outraged, demanding answers. Sergeant Roberto, with Leo safe in his arms, knew that the boy's story was much more than a simple rescue. It was proof that kindness, compassion, and human and animal connection could flourish in the darkest places, unmasking cruelty and paving the way for new hope. Justice, slow but relentless, began to move, and Donna Ilara's fate was sealed. Justice, slow but relentless, began to move, and Donna Ilara's fate was sealed. The mansion, once a refuge of her calculating coldness, transformed into a prison of anxiety. The incessant ringing of the phone was compounded by the buzz of the doorbell, announcing the arrival of court officials, lawyers, and worse still, journalists hungry for every sordid detail. Donna Ilara, with impeccably styled hair and a pale countenance, tried to maintain her composure, but her eyes, once icy and expressionless, now revealed a growing panic. She locked herself in her office, surrounded by piles of legal documents that attested to the gravity of her situation. Every word, every paragraph seemed like a hammer striking her icy fortress. The world she had so meticulously built was crumbling. Newspaper headlines emblazoned her image alongside the innocent photo of Leo and the majestic albino tiger. The millionaire's cruelty, the forest miracle, the truth unmasked. Public scrutiny was relentless, and condemnation universal. She saw the neighbors, once respectful, now look at her with contempt. Mrs. Almeida, the housekeeper, avoided her gaze, and Maria, the cook, didn't even return to the mansion, a silence that spoke louder than any accusation. Donna Ilara felt the weight of shame, a strange and corrosive feeling she had never allowed in her life. It wasn't remorse, she insisted, but the humiliation of having her name dragged through the mud. Meanwhile, Leo was safe in Maria's arms, in her small, cozy home. The boy, still a little pale, but with the sparkle in his eyes restored, drew tigers with crayons, coloring them white, a symbol of his protector. Maria watched him with a love that overflowed, her heart mended by the little one's presence. Sergeant Roberto, who had become a father figure for Leo, visited them regularly, bringing small gifts and stories that made the boy laugh. The community united in a collective embrace, offering support, donations, and a temporary home for Leo, until a permanent solution could be found. The story of the albino tiger and the boy Leo became a phenomenon, a modern fairy tale that resonated with the belief in unexpected kindness. People came from afar to leave flowers and letters at the edge of the forest where Leo was found, a silent tribute to the miracle. In court, the case against Donna Ilara moved swiftly. The evidence was irrefutable. Maria's testimony, the unanswered calls, Leo's absence from any travel records. Donna Ilara, seated in the defendant's bench, listened to the accusations with a rigid posture, an expressionless face. However, during one of the most emotional testimonies, when Maria described Leo's fever and her own anguish, something unexpected happened. Donna Ilara, who until then seemed immune to any emotion, brought her hands to her face. A muffled sob escaped her lips, and her body began to tremble uncontrollably. The mask of coldness shattered, revealing a vulnerability no one had ever imagined. She wasn't crying for Leo, not directly, but for an old pain, a deep wound that the cruelty of her own act had, unintentionally reopened. It was the echo of a long-buried trauma, a memory of abandonment she herself had suffered in childhood, which had transformed her into the woman she was. The revelation, though silent and unverbalized, shocked everyone in the room. The silence in the courtroom, once tense and charged with indignation, transformed into a stunned emptiness. The whispers ceased, and all eyes turned to Donna Ilara, whose imposing figure now cowered, her shoulders trembling under the weight of an invisible pain. The sob, which seemed to have torn her soul, echoed in the room, shattering the image of an iron woman she had cultivated for decades. The judge, a man experienced in human dramas, gently tapped his gavel, not to silence, but to mark the unexpected pause. He observed the defendant with an expression that mixed surprise with a hint of melancholy, a glimpse of humanity amidst the rigidity of the law. Not even the lawyers, accustomed to the millionaire's impassivity, knew how to react to that sudden and raw manifestation of vulnerability. The truth, at times, reveals itself in the deepest cracks of the soul, exposing scars that neither wealth nor power can hide. In that moment, Donna Ilara didn't see the courtroom, nor the curious or condemning faces. She was back in the small, cold house of her childhood, a thin and frightened girl, abandoned by parents who considered her a burden. The same fever that had consumed Leo years later had left her prostrate on a damp cot, and the only help she received was the oppressive silence and the icy absence of any affection. The fear of being forgotten, of not being loved, of being discarded as worthless had rooted deeply in her heart, transforming into an impenetrable armor of coldness and control. She believed that if she didn't love, she couldn't be abandoned. If she didn't care, she wouldn't feel pain. The cruelty towards Leo was not an act of pure hatred, but a distorted projection of her own wound, a desperate attempt to rid herself of a living reminder of her own vulnerability and the trauma that haunted her. The crying was not for Leo, not directly, but for the girl she had been, for the pain that had never stopped bleeding within her, now brutally reopened. The news of Donna Ilara's emotional collapse in court spread as quickly as that of Leo's miraculous rescue. The community, which once saw her as the personification of evil and indifference, now divided in its opinions. Some felt a glimpse of pity, an understanding that even the hardest hearts could harbor old wounds. Others, however, felt an even greater anger, considering her tears an act of hypocrisy, a desperate attempt to manipulate public opinion. But for Maria, who had witnessed the scene with a heavy heart, there was a silent and painful understanding. She knew that pain, even when misdirected and manifested in cruel acts, was real and profound. Meanwhile, in Maria's small, cozy home, Leo flourished like a flower finally finding the sun. His drawings of white tigers multiplied, each more vivid and full of life, filling the walls with the memory of his protector. He laughed easily, a crystalline sound that filled the room, told stories about his giant friend with an enchanting purity, and for the first time in his short life experienced the warmth of a true and loving home. Maria, with the tireless help of Sergeant Roberto and the entire community, was building for Leo not just a safe roof, but a nest of affection and security. The sergeant's visits became an expected ritual, and he read to Leo, teaching him about the forest and animals, always with an attentive and affectionate gaze for the boy's well-being. The story of Leo and the albino tiger continued to inspire everyone, showing that kindness and protection could emerge from the most unexpected places, and that love was, in fact, the most powerful force of all, capable of healing the deepest wounds. For Donna Ilara, the path ahead would be long and painful, not only because of the justice of men that would reach her, but because of the inevitable confrontation with her own past. The true punishment would be the need to look at the abandoned girl she had become, and with the chance to, perhaps for the first time in her life, begin to heal the wounds that had made her so cold and cruel. Society, through Leo's case, learned that compassion and understanding were as essential as punishment, and that true redemption began with the recognition of one's own humanity, even in the depths of despair. Leo's future, on the other hand, promised to be as bright and full of hope as the sparkle in the eyes of his wild protector, a beacon that life always finds a way to the light. Leo's future, on the other hand, promised to be as bright and full of hope as the sparkle in the eyes of his wild protector, a beacon that life always finds a way to the light. In Maria's small house, Leo's crystalline laughter echoed through the walls, a sound that was once rare and now became the constant melody of a truly welcoming home. He adapted with surprising ease, like a little plant that, after being transplanted into fertile soil and watered with care, finds the strength to bloom. Maria, with her generous heart and hands that never tired, dedicated every moment to him, teaching him to read small words in colorful books, to draw vibrant flowers, and to feel the unwavering security of a tight, comforting hug. Leo, who once cowered, now snuggled, seeking and offering affection with the innocence of his 5 years. Sergeant Roberto, who had become a fundamental pillar of support for Maria and Leo, visited them frequently, bringing small gifts such as wooden toy cars and storybooks about forest animals, and games that made Leo forget the dark and lonely days. He observed Leo with an almost paternal affection, feeling deep satisfaction at seeing the boy regain the joy and liveliness in his childlike eyes. The community, in turn, continued to weave a network of solidarity and love around Leo. Neighbors brought homemade cakes, new clothes, simple toys, and offered practical help to Maria, who now had the sweet and immense responsibility of caring for the boy. It was a touching demonstration of altruism and human connection, proving that the true wealth of a society lay in compassion and mutual care. While Leo's life filled with light and affection, Donna Ilara's plunged into an increasingly dense and suffocating darkness. The trial progressed, and each day brought new public humiliations. She was forced to listen to testimonies that laid bare her cruelty, and to see herself portrayed as a monstrous and heartless figure in sensationalist newspaper headlines. The mansion, once her sanctuary of power and isolation, now seemed like a cold and empty mausoleum, echoing with the absence of life and any affection. The employees, with the exception of a loyal few who stayed out of duty, had left, unable to bear the atmosphere of disgrace and condemnation. Mrs. Almeida, the housekeeper who had served her for decades with devotion and loyalty, was one of the last to say goodbye, her eyes clouded with sadness and disillusionment, a silent farewell that weighed more than 1,000 accusations. Donna Ilara tried to maintain the facade of indifference and control, but the nights were long and populated by ghosts of a past she had tried to bury. The image of Leo, feverish and abandoned to his fate, disturbingly mingled with that of the girl she had been, alone and frightened in her own childhood. The wounds of her youth, which she believed she had sealed with an impenetrable armor of coldness and calculation, now bled openly, exposing a vulnerability that terrified her. She saw herself in Leo, and this painful identification was the cruelest punishment. It wasn't genuine remorse in the sense of regretting the harm caused, but a searing and profound pain, the pain of reliving her own abandonment through the eyes of her innocent victim. Her lawyer, a pragmatic man with no illusions about human nature, tried to negotiate a plea bargain, but the relentless public opinion and the unquestionable gravity of the crime made the task almost impossible. Justice for Donna Ilara would not just be a matter of laws and sentences pronounced in a courtroom, but a relentless mirror that forced her to face herself, the woman she had become. She felt cornered, not by prison walls, but by the invisible walls of her own past and the irreversible consequences of her choices. The oppressive silence of the mansion, once a refuge of her calculated solitude, was now a constant torment, filled with the echoes of her own dark thoughts and the icy absence of any true affection. The fortune which she so valued and for which she had sacrificed so much seemed useless and meaningless in the face of the irreparable loss of her reputation and inner peace. Leo, on the other hand, didn't care about fortunes or the coldness of the outside world. For him, the greatest wealth was Maria's welcoming smile, Sergeant Roberto's gentle and protective voice, and the vivid memory of the albino tiger, his giant friend and guardian. He still spoke of the tiger, recounted his adventures in the forest with a sparkle in his eyes that was contagious, and Maria listened with patience and a tender smile, knowing that that experience, however traumatic it had been at its beginning, had forged a resilient boy, full of love and an unwavering faith in goodness. The story of Leo and his wild protector continued to be told, inspiring everyone about the capacity for overcoming adversity, the strength of unexpected connection, and the kindness that can emerge in the most unlikely places, transforming abandonment into a true miracle of connection and hope. Life for Leo had found its way to the light, guided by the hand of love and compassion that surrounded him. Each day was a new chapter in his story, written with the vibrant hues of hope and security, a silent testament that even in the greatest adversities, the human heart, and even the animal heart, can find a way to love and protect. Maria's small house had transformed into a refuge of laughter and discovery. Leo, at 5 years old, absorbed every lesson like a sponge, his curious eyes shining as he learned to differentiate the colors of birds in the books Maria read to him. He helped water the small plants in the garden, feeling the soft earth between his fingers, a simple and profound connection to the life that had once been denied him. Maria observed each of these gestures with a soul-warming smile, her wrinkled hands caressing the boy's brown hair. She felt that Leo was not just a child under her care, but a piece of her own heart that had been restored. Sergeant Roberto, with his calm and protective presence, continued to be an essential figure. He taught Leo to assemble small puzzles, to recognize the sounds of the forest on safe walks in the surroundings, and the importance of caring for animals. Leo, in turn, shared with the sergeant his memories of the albino tiger, describing the warmth of its fur and the feeling of security the animal had conveyed to him. The sergeant listened attentively, understanding that that experience, however extraordinary, had shaped the boy's pure and resilient essence. While Leo's life unfolded in vibrant colors, Donna Ilara's remained shrouded in an oppressive gray. The trial, which dragged on for weeks, was an increasingly heavy burden. The sessions were long, and every testimony, every piece of evidence presented seemed like a stab at her already fragile armor. She tried to maintain a haughty posture, chin held high, but her eyes, once so cold and calculating, now revealed a deep weariness and a shadow of despair. The nights in the mansion were a torment. The silence that was once an ally was now an enemy, filled with the echoes of her own conscience and the disturbing images of her past. Leo's feverish face, abandoned at the edge of the forest, merged with the image of the girl she had been, alone and frightened, forgotten in a dark corner, the pain of abandonment, which she had tried to silence her whole life with the incessant pursuit of power and wealth, now screamed within her, uncontrollable. She clung to the idea that her tears in court were not remorse, but public humiliation and the reopening of her own wounds. However, deep in her soul, a small and unsettling seed of questioning began to germinate. Could it be that the pain she had caused Leo was a reflection of the pain she herself carried? This question, once unthinkable, now haunted her persistently. Her visibly frustrated lawyer insisted that she show some sign of repentance, but Donna Ilara, even in her despair, could not articulate the words. Her throat seemed closed by a knot of pride and a pain so old it refused to be named. She merely shook her head, lips pressed tight, while the man sighed, knowing that the legal battle became harder each day. The community remained divided in its opinions. Some, their hearts softened by the revelation of her vulnerability, hoped she would find some kind of redemption. Others, the majority, saw her tears as theater, a last desperate act to escape justice. But the truth was that Donna Ilara was trapped in her own prison, built brick by brick with the coldness and isolation she had chosen. The fortune, which once gave her a sense of invincibility, was now a weight, a constant reminder of the emptiness that filled her life. She watched the newspaper headlines, which daily featured new criticisms and condemnations, and felt the world crumbling around her. The idea that Leo, the little boy she considered a nuisance, had found such genuine love and a home, while she lost everything, was a cruel irony that gnawed at her from within. The human connection, which she had always scorned, was exactly what Leo had found, and what she, in her gilded solitude, had never possessed. On that day, the last of the trial, the prosecutor rose for his closing arguments. His voice, once firm and incisive, now took on a softer, almost melancholic tone as he described Leo's innocence and the cruelty of the abandonment. He no longer needed to attack Donna Ilara. The story spoke for itself. His eyes swept the room, pausing for an instant on Donna Ilara's. There was no anger, only a deep sadness. In that gaze, she saw not the prosecutor's condemnation, but the image of herself, a lost child, devoid of love. It was a shock, a brutal recognition. The armor she had built for decades cracked, and the tears that were once of humiliation now were of a genuine, overwhelming pain. She could no longer sustain the gaze, nor the facade. Her body trembled, and she brought her hands to her face, not to hide the shame, but to contain the silent scream forming in her soul. The prosecutor concluded, his voice resonating in the silenced room. "True justice, Your Honor, is not merely punishment, but confrontation with one's own humanity." Donna Ilara felt the weight of every word, not as an accusation, but as a relentless mirror. She was there, exposed not just to the court, but to herself. The emptiness in her chest, once filled with pride and bitterness, was now an open wound, pulsating with the truth she had avoided for so long. The seed of questioning had finally sprouted, and with it, the excruciating pain of a lifetime of denial. The verdict, she knew, had already been delivered, not by the judge, but by her own shattered heart. The judge's gavel resonated in the room, sealing Donna Ilara's fate. The sentence was pronounced: years of incarceration and the allocation of her fortune to Leo and other children. To everyone's surprise, Donna Ilara showed no defiance. Her shoulders, once rigid, relaxed, as if a weight had been lifted. She stood up, her movements slow and devoid of her former haughtiness, allowing the officers to lead her away. There was no despair in her gaze, only a deep weariness and the feeling that for the first time she was being true to herself. The image of the prosecutor, who had made her see the abandoned child within herself, was now an undeniable truth. The punishment was not just the bars, but the relentless confrontation with who she had become and who she had been. The armor, unbreakable in her mind, had shattered, finally revealing the exposed wound of a life of denial and pride. While Donna Ilara embarked on her new and somber reality, Maria's small house overflowed with light and laughter. Leo, at 5 years old, had found a home where every hug was a safe harbor and every word a melody of affection. He ran through the yard, knees dirty with earth, eyes shining with the curiosity of the world. Maria, with her tender smile, watched him from the porch, feeling her heart overflow with gratitude. Sergeant Roberto, a father figure for Leo, took him for short walks, teaching him about plants and the sounds of the forest, always with the memory of the albino tiger, his giant friend and first protector. The animal's memory was no longer a ghost, but a testament to the unexpected kindness that had transformed fear into courage and love. The community continued to surround Leo with a network of affection and support. Neighbors brought cakes, clothes and toys, celebrating the boy's resilience and Maria's generosity. Leo, who once cowered, now opened up to the world, sharing his joy and his unwavering faith in human goodness. He was living proof that even after the deepest darkness, the light of love and connection can always find a way to shine. For Donna Ilara, life in prison was a brutal contrast. Far from opulence and power, she was just one among many, stripped of her social identity. The nights were filled with the oppressive silence of her cell and the echoes of her choices. The fortune, which once gave her a sense of invincibility, was now a bitter reminder of the emptiness that filled her life. She observed the world through the bars, and the cruel irony that Leo, the little boy she had tried to erase, had found such genuine love and a welcoming family, while she lost everything, gnawed at her from within. Justice had been served, not only by law, but by Donna Ilara's painful confrontation with her own soul. The seed of questioning had sprouted, and with it the acceptance that true wealth lies in human connection, something Leo had found, and that she, in her gilded solitude, had never possessed. Peace, she now realized, would not come from fortune, but from truth and perhaps one day, from a true forgiveness she still didn't know how to seek. In that environment of cold walls and rigid routines, Donna Ilara dedicated herself to introspection. The nights, once torturous, now offered space for memory, no longer for denial. She revisited her own childhood, the frightened and lonely girl she had been, beginning to understand the origin of the coldness that had consumed her. It wasn't easy acceptance, but a painful process of deconstruction. The tears, once of humiliation, transformed into silent weeping of grief for a life not lived. She read the few permitted books, seeking solace, and, for the first time, she wrote. Not defenses, but reflections on the emptiness of fortune and the wealth Leo had found. Slowly, the idea of forgiveness echoed in her heart, first for herself, then perhaps for the wounded world. Her gestures were softer, her expression still sad, carried a quietness previously unknown. She didn't seek physical freedom, but the liberation of her inner prison. Meanwhile, Leo flourished. Years passed, and the 5-year-old boy, who one day stood at the edge of the forest, transformed into a vibrant child, full of energy and insatiable curiosity. His laughter echoed through Maria's small house and the blooming garden he helped tend. He went to school where his brown eyes shone as he learned about the world, and his drawings always included a majestic albino tiger, his silent guardian. The story of his rescue, lovingly told by Maria and Sergeant Roberto, was not a burden. but a fundamental part of who he was. Leo grew with unusual compassion, love for animals, and unwavering faith in goodness, knowing that light can emerge from the deepest darkness. He became a living symbol of resilience, a reminder that love and human connection are life's true treasures. Maria and Sergeant Roberto watched Leo with immense pride. Maria's house, once silent, was now a home full of life and joy. She, with her graying hair and hands that had worked her whole life, found in Leo the joy of late motherhood, a renewed purpose. Sergeant Roberto, in turn, continued to be the steadfast rock, the father Leo never knew. He taught the boy to fish in the nearby stream, to recognize the stars in the night sky, and the importance of always defending the weak. The love that united them was not of blood, but of soul, forged in adversity and strengthened each day. They were living proof that family is built with bonds of affection, care, and unconditional dedication, regardless of circumstances. The story of Leo and the albino tiger was never forgotten. It became a local legend, a tale that inspired everyone about overcoming adversity and the kindness that can emerge from the most unexpected places. The forest, once viewed with fear, was now also a place of mystery and wonder, a reminder of divine intervention through nature. The albino tiger, a predator turned protector, symbolized the breaking of prejudices, the revelation that a being's true nature is not defined by appearance, but by actions. The community, united by the search and the miracle, continued to weave a network of support, not only for Leo, but for all who needed it, reinforcing the values of altruism and solidarity that the story had awakened. Leo, the boy whom nature had embraced and human love had welcomed, grew to be a gentle and strong man with an open heart to the world. He never forgot the warmth of the tiger's fur, the security amidst the darkness. That memory propelled him to be a force for good. His life was a testament. Abandonment can be the prelude to a new beginning, cruelty confronted by compassion, and justice, in its many forms, always finds its way. The story of Leo, Maria, Sergeant Roberto, and even Donna Elara became an eternal reminder. True inheritance is not material, but the legacy of love, hope, and the unforgettable lesson that kindness, even the wildest, can transform lives and heal the deepest wounds. The story of Leo, Maria, Sergeant Roberto, and even Donna Elara became an eternal reminder. True inheritance is not material, but the legacy of love, hope, and the unforgettable lesson that kindness, even the wildest, can transform lives and heal the deepest wounds. Years passed, and little Leo, who one day stood at the edge of the forest, transformed into a young man in his early 20s with a serenity and strength that inspired everyone. His brown eyes, once filled with terror and fever, now shone with deep compassion, directed at every child. Leo dedicated his life to a foundation he himself created, Wild Embrace, to support vulnerable children, offering them the safe haven he himself had found. He told his story with a calm and moving voice, a testament to resilience and unexpected kindness. In every lecture and embrace, Leo felt the warmth of the albino tiger's fur, a reminder that compassion knows no bounds and life always offers a new chance. Maria and Sergeant Roberto, now with whiter hair and slower steps, watched Leo with a pride that transcended blood ties. Maria's small house, now expanded and always full of laughter, was the heart of the foundation, a safe haven where love was the only rule. Maria, with her wrinkled hands and a sparkle in her eyes, said that Leo had taught everyone that family is built with the heart, not with papers. Sergeant Roberto, with a gentle smile and a nod, reminded Leo of the importance of listening to nature, for it holds secrets of wisdom. They were the foundation, living proof that love can rebuild lives and that family welcomes and loves without reservation. While Leo's life flourished in altruism, Donna Elara, In her cell continued her silent journey. The years had softened the harsh lines of her face, but the sadness in her eyes remained, now mingled with a reflective quietness and dignity. She had become a discreet figure, helping other inmates with practical advice and listening. In her rare letters to her lawyer, she wrote about the pain of regret and the liberation of accepting her humanity. She never asked Leo for forgiveness directly, feeling the words empty and insufficient, but her actions were a testament to her profound transformation. She read the newspapers about Leo's work, and a strange warmth, a mix of pride and remorse, warmed her chest. The material inheritance had vanished, but Leo's inheritance of love and hope was something she, in her solitude, finally understood and valued. The story of the boy and the albino tiger had spread far beyond the mountains, a hymn to kindness and resilience. Schools taught about Leo's courage and the wild animals' compassion. The forest, once feared, was now a symbol of protection and mystery, where the impossible had become real. The albino tiger, never seen again, lived in the imagination as a guardian of innocence, a reminder that nature can surprise us with acts of pure love. Leo, with his life dedicated to sowing hope and healing wounds, was living proof that adversities are overcome by human connection, and that true wealth lies in the ability to love, forgive, and build a future of light. His story was a beacon, illuminating the path for those seeking meaning in life, an eternal testament that, even in the shadows, the light of goodness always finds a way, transforming abandonment into a miracle that would echo for generations, inspiring everyone to seek the true essence of humanity.